Eating and intermittently fasting in alignment with human physiology is only offensive to the ego of a culture with an addiction both to food and to being offended. Dr. Will Cole.
You're listening to the Coached Podcast, hosted by Coach Karen Eldad, world-class personal and executive coach. It's your show. We answer your questions, and you get coached on any issue that concerns you. Here's Coach Karen.
Hey there, superstars. Welcome back to another special guest episode of the Coached Podcast. This time, welcoming my very special guest and my very dear friend, Dr. Will Cole. Dr. Cole is a senior functional medicine clinic director in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who consults worldwide in autoimmune, brain, gut, hormone, and thyroid health. And as such, he has become a leading expert in the world of wellness and nutrition. He's also the very well-known and New York Times best-selling author of The Inflammation Spectrum, Ketotarian, and the new megawatt book that I personally love, Intuitive Fasting. And if that weren't enough, he's also the host of the new podcast, The Art of Being Well, with Dr. Will Cole. Now, although I've followed his protocol in the new book, Intuitive Fasting, to the letter and had a wonderful time with it and really enjoyed it, I'm going to recommend this with all my heart in the show notes, but that's not what we're going to talk about in today's episode. In today's episode, we're joining forces to share and discuss his thoughts about the backlash that he has suffered against this book. A very slight, very mild backlash, but still very important to talk about because we want to talk about how we can deal with criticism and taking accountability versus accepting shame or being shamed. While taking accountability is a prerequisite for any kind of change, shame or shaming is actually an obstacle to bringing about positive change. And forget about that within our work. It's about you and your life. And that's why we want to talk about this and why we need to get our heads and our hearts around the difference between these to welcome goodness and change into our lives. Now, here's why this topic and why now. Again, although intuitive fasting offers an easy way to eat for wellness without any calorie restriction or any form of restriction or extreme eating, which I can tell you because I've done it for 4 weeks and because I read every single word of that book, I couldn't help but notice that at the book's launch in February 2021, with a foreword by Gwyneth Paltrow, no less, Dr. Cole was the recipient of some unkind criticism and accusations that in one instance, I observed in an Instagram live to even include the words, "Stop promoting eating disorders." Now, first of all, that struck me personally because I can relate. I don't like hurtful criticism. I have not evolved past getting my feelings hurt. And I think that most people haven't either. So the first thing that happened was I really have to think about what that felt like and what it felt like to being at the mercy of random people's critique that perhaps was not as well informed as it could be. Again, if you had read the book, I don't think anyone would have reached that conclusion. And nowadays, I'm lucky to have a much stronger understanding of how to sort through criticism and how to digest it. But that was my initial reaction, which was that hurt. And the second thing that it made me feel was, or that I processed this as, was I saw that my friend's work, which was phenomenal work, and whose intention I think I understood, was the subject of a barrage of unfounded accusations. And that too felt uncomfortable. And then both of these in combination turned in my mind to a curiosity, really. I got curious about this and I thought, what a great chance, what a great opportunity to talk about something that is affecting so many people culturally, culture that is really lurking all around us in a personal way, in a way that actually makes this tenable and understandable for everybody. My hope, therefore, is that today we can have an honest conversation about what it's like to be in the arena with somebody who's actually in the arena, Dr. Will Cole. And that will help us to actively unpack shaming, making someone feel, or trying to make someone feel what Brene Brown has defined as an intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and unworthy of love and belonging, versus offering legitimate criticism and taking accountability. And I hope that this conversation will be useful to you just in unpacking those differences. I also hope that it'll be useful to you by giving you some real ways that Dr. Will actually deals with criticism and accountability himself in his life. If you receive any of this, from respite to clarity, in today's episode, that's awesome. I hope you love it. And if you do, I hope you're going to subscribe and give us your 5-star rating. It truly makes an awesome difference. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and begin and introduce you to my very special guest, Dr. Will Cole. Dr. Cole, my friend, shalom.
Shalom, my friend.
Your book launched in February 2021, Mazel Tov. What an achievement. How's it been going so far?
It's going well. And it's really, as you said beautifully and very eloquently in the introduction. Thank you so much for the kindness. It's been a whirlwind of a lot of good things, and then some noise that was unexpected for sure. But, in hindsight, I respect all of it. And in hindsight, I think there was a lot of alchemy that happened there, and I think it was, all fine. I'm at peace with it. Because my day job, as you know, I'm spending 11 hours a day consulting people via webcam, immersed in their labs and getting them healthy. And that's my main focus. So when it was the week of pub release of the book, and that was kind of like all the chatter on social media about the book, it was definitely not what I'm used to, right? But it was nice to get back into patients the next Monday and get right back into it and put things into perspective. I mean, getting someone healthy or people regaining health for themselves shouldn't be a radical thing. It shouldn't be a negative thing or a controversial thing. It's actually anything but.
Well, it isn't a radical thing. I can say it's not a radical thing and anchor this in some numbers, which I decided to look up because I always brush up on new numbers before anytime I tackle a topic like this. The latest reports from the CDC are that 17% of the United States is on a diet versus 14%, which was on a diet last year. That's overall in a year. 42% of Americans are obese versus 34%, which is a decade ago. And in stark contrast, 9% of Americans will experience an eating disorder in their lifetime, under 6% of which are actually diagnosed as underweight. So there's a very big misconception about where we tackle eating and eating healthfully from. I actually started using eating as a tool in coaching, practice, and advisory, referring people to people like you whose work is dedicated to this. When my mom, God bless her, became very, very ill, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Up until then, I didn't really think too much about the subject, even though, of course, in high school, like everybody else, I was engaged with trying to lose weight. I think that there's a real misnomer and misconception around this as diet culture when it is in fact health culture and wellness culture. And that's where I wanted to start today's conversation. And for those who don't know and who are perhaps unfamiliar even with the concept of intermittent fasting, you and I live in this world where this is very common, right? A lot of people talking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But for other people,
Mm-hmm.
what are the basic tenets of this wellness philosophy? What is this about?
Yeah, so it's for people to get a little bit of a background of what I do clinically. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, like you said. So intermittent fasting is one of many tools that I use clinically and have used my entire career over the past 12 years. And it's nothing new within the health space, intermittent fasting. And it's nothing new when it comes to medicine. I mean, it's been used throughout medicine, fasting protocols and different ways of doing fasting. It's been used spiritually for many reasons as well. And from an ancestral health perspective, it was used just out of food scarcity sometimes. So fasting is actually coded in our DNA. And researchers estimate that 99%, the majority of our genetics haven't changed in 10,000 years. So a lot of what the research is looking at when it comes to fasting and how are we seeing the benefits of it, where are the health benefits coming from? It's decreasing the chasm between genetics and epigenetics, where our world has changed very dramatically in a very short period of time when you're putting that into perspective with the totality of human history. So this genetic, epigenetic, our DNA in the world around us, this mismatch is really at the heart of why so many people are seeing chronic health problems, autoimmune problems, mental health issues, metabolic issues, different inflammatory problems. So fasting is a way to decrease that mismatch or start to bring more bring alignment into our DNA in the world around us. So intermittent fasting, and more specifically the subset of intermittent fasting that I talk about within intuitive fasting, is something called time compressed feeding or time restricted feeding. It is nothing to do with caloric restriction chronically. It's not a more what you would consider a more extreme fasting. It's not that at all. And those longer fasts do have their place therapeutically, and there's exciting science around that. And that's a different conversation. But the specific type of fasting that I talk about within intuitive fasting, it's you're eating the same amount of food that you would normally eat. You're eating nutrient dense, healthy foods. You're just doing it in specific windows to give your body more of a fasting window throughout the day to start to tap into some of those health benefits of intermittent fasting. So I would say it's a more of a lifestyle, accessible, approachable, sustainable approach to intermittent fasting for the everyday person.
It's more digestion focused. It's more balance focused. And, of course, those are music to my ears as a coach. But let's talk about this in practicality, and I'll tell you what my experience has been. I liken this process, any form of mindfulness applied to something that you usually don't do mindfully, which I don't often do as mindfully as I should, perhaps. It's like it becomes a cornerstone habit that trickles down to everything else in your life. When you start to apply the most minimal thought to how you're eating, to the time that you want to allocate to proper digestion, to thinking about what you're consuming on a daily basis. For example, for the protocol for the 4 weeks, I have not had any drink of alcohol. And that was actually pretty refreshing because I can finally actually measure what my response to alcohol is when I don't really go through any thought process. I don't really know what the measure is. And now I know. I also know to eat when I'm hungry, which is such a novel concept for most of us who have become just trained to eat when the fridge is near. And hopefully that kind of approach is very, very open minded and very accessible to other people. This is sort of how I speak about positivity, about the practices of mindfulness, of meditation. Just start to become aware of what else is available to you, and the whole world will blow open, right? So,
Absolutely.
if both of us agree on this, and both of us are pretty gentle souls, I've known you for a year and a half now, we're real sweethearts, then why would anyone hurl any kind of criticism? What do you mean when you said, I guess I understand the alchemy of this? The energy of this may have been building up to a certain crescendo.
Yeah, so when I wrote the book, I started writing the book at the end of 2019 and then over entire 2020, and then it came out February 2021. So when I wrote it, the intention of the book is really, again, born out of my clinical experience. I get to see all hours of the day, sun up to sundown. I get to see the power of the intermittent fasting used in this way, in a mindful way, hence its name, intuitive fasting. It's a more mindful, using intermittent fasting as a mindfulness practice, use food as a mindfulness practice, and it's interwoven throughout that book. So I thought, you know what, this is going to be such a positive conversation about intermittent fasting. Anybody that reads the book will see my heart through that, will see that this is has a grace and a lightness to intermittent fasting, where oftentimes intermittent fasting books can bring that biohacker alpha energy to it, where it works for many people, and there's a lot of exciting science around that, but the heart and the context around it sometimes is lost to the average person. And good things can be used improperly. Any good thing within wellness or life can be used improperly or abused. So I wanted to have a conversation about a healthy, measured, graceful approach to intermittent fasting. But it was interesting. I mean, it's really, in hindsight, it should not have been surprising when the book came out, how things can be twisted for people that had never read the book.
Yeah.
Literally judging a book by its cover. And they were so triggered about it when everything that they were thinking that it was about, it wasn't about. And when they read the book, all the things that they were saying, well, that should have been this. Well, if they read the book, they would have known it was that.
Yeah.
It was that. So I don't know. It's to me, it's the sign of the times. It's where we're at right now as a culture, where people can, it's this toxic tribalism, this toxic cancel culture, where people feel like they're word police, they're thought police, and anything that's not there within their echo chamber, they attack. And there's these militant factions within every ideology or every idea. And it's beyond politics now. It's now food and wellness and anything, any idea has a militant faction. And it can get so ugly, right? And it's, I'm nothing special. It's just part of that that problem that's within our culture just happened to happen around the book. But there was so much more positivity than negativity. But
That is true. And that is a very important thing to realize and to understand. And I'm really glad that you do. Just because 12 people are very vocal now because they do have some form of platform and gives them a feeling of significance to hurl at someone, particularly when they're unresearched, when they haven't actually gone through any of the content, doesn't mean that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, is not still trusting. So I really believe the cancel culture, which I think is pissing us off on the left, but certainly also pissing off people on the right, is a universal response to just an uninformed hurling of criticism that is attempting to shame, not attempting to hold accountable. And those are two very, very different things that I sort of want to talk about a little bit more. But first, I want to tell you the reason it's not surprising is twofold, and you should take these as huge compliments. The first is the philosopher and historian Rutger Bregman has written extensively that the most radical thing you can do today, the most inflaming thing you can do, from a dinner party to a talk, is argue for positivity and wellness. Because most people don't really like to buy that the world is as good as you think it is, or you say it's possible to be. And it is. The second thing I want to say is I think the reason this is happening, not only to you, but to so many others, is because you are prominent. You are in the arena. And part of being in the arena is understanding not only that you will make mistakes, as Brene Brown said, but that there are other people who will decide to therefore try to capitalize on your prominence. So it's actually not a terrible thing. When I had an imposter this year, somebody faked many of my accounts, and amazing, like used all of my pictures and even pictures, private pictures of me and Ryan. And the first thing I thought was, oh no, how awful. And the second thing I thought was, I must be doing something right.
yeah. Yeah, it's a weird world we live in, right? I mean, but ultimately, in hindsight, that's the alchemy that I was just referring to. Like like the loud minority of people, like the loud militant people, right, that are not the majority of people. They actually really helped the book because their negativity actually helped the algorithm and raised visibility. Where more people bought the book, we hit the New York Times list. And people that actually read the book, they're being helped because they actually read the book. So to me, it was completely amalgamated into something beautiful. And so I have to thank the people. Thank the people that tried to silence us because he just made us louder.
Some of your enemies, you should write them a check. And that's always true. They really do promote you to the next level. That's so exciting to hear. I did my intermittent fasting, by the way, in a group with several other friends, just to lock myself into support. And I think that that's a great segue because I want to ask you, all right, so I don't know if you remember, but the first time we met, it was at In Goop Health, which is a conference that Goop does annually or biannually, depending on a number of cities and COVID. And I got to ask Gwyneth Paltrow if the spoofs of Goop and of her were hurtful to her. And her answer really resonated with me. She just shrugged and said, it would only hurt me if it was accurate. It's not truthful, so it doesn't hurt me. I wonder, can you choose which feedback to take on and which feedback not to take on? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a learning process for me. I mean, in many ways, I was naive. As I mentioned, that my main focus is I love functional medicine. I love people. I love helping people through functional medicine. I love writing about functional medicine. I love talking about it. So that's my main. I've been in that world for a long time now. So this was a new thing where I'm on social media, so I get some of it, but there was a whole different level of misunderstanding, and my initial reaction was feeling hurt. My feelings were hurt that I was misunderstood because you can't control people saying things that aren't true on social media. So you just have to kind of take it. But it was honestly Gwyneth and other people that have gone through this that really kind of helped me process it. And it really was just a processing thing. So it was just had to come out of it and really put things into perspective, because you're right that you shouldn't be, you have to. And I actually read an article that Brene Brown talked about this, where it's easy for us to say, well, like those things don't hurt us, right? Well, we're actually, as humans, not wired for that. We're wired to get hurt from people, the feelings, but how our feelings get hurt and care what people think to some degree. But I think it really comes down to putting things into perspective. And it's not that mean things won't hurt our feelings, but it's not overvaluing something if something, we're giving something more value than it should have. And I think if you really are coming from a place of authenticity and truly knowing what you're talking about and really coming from a good place, to me, that is what put it into perspective for me, is that everybody that read the book knows what the message was. It wasn't just eating, because that was the conversation, I guess, for people that aren't aware of it. The accusations were, we are advocating for disordered eating.
Yeah.
And they were very triggered by the word intuitive with fasting, because they, again, word police. And
they didn't read the book.
Yeah, they didn't read the book, but the idea that fasting could be intuitive was very triggering for them. So it's really a conversation about metabolic flexibility and mindfulness. And it's, once someone reads the book, they'll get it. But it was that. So I don't know. To me, I learned a lot through it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I actually learned so much about myself and about people through that process.
Well, I really appreciate that third element that you introduced here. Just to summarize, what I'm hearing is that there are really 3 ways that you found that really helped you to wrap your head around this particular instance, which I know will serve you forever. The first is rooting yourself in your intention, in your practice, and in your authentic, real who you really are. You didn't disconnect from that. You went inwards. You were mindful. You asked yourself, was I really trying to harm? Probably not. So I'm going to be gentle on myself, and I'm going to do the work internally and shift my perspective. And it's normal to take that first as a sling and arrow, because as Dr. Brene Brown has said extensively, shame feels like rejection, like we're going to be thrown out of the tribe. So automatically our limbic brain starts to operate like a primal kind of response to, no, don't leave me. But if you go inward and you start to realize that nothing really crazy is going on, you'll start to relax. The second thing you mentioned was relying on a squad, on people who've been there, done that, and who can possibly lend you a much, much greater perspective. I can think of no one better, quite frankly, than Gwyneth Paltrow. But really, anybody who's put themselves and their ideas out there knows some degree of this, and also knows that in order for any excellence to really come forth, you have to sort of learn how to deal with it. And the third thing I heard, in brief, which really moved me, was gratitude. Find the perspective of gratitude that it happened and what's good about this. And if you can do that, you can really get through absolutely everything. I can't tell you how much it's moved me to hear that from you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it is. I just to reiterate that, I am extremely grateful for that whole experience. It was definitely, I used it as a meditation. It was hard to be in a state of acceptance at the beginning part of it, but then through it, it was actually beautiful. It was really beautiful. And I actually saw silver linings within that whole process of people that were actually some of the bigger voices that made judgments about the book actually come back out and say, apologize. They actually apologized. They said, hey, you know right, I didn't read the book. And I was too flippant to make a story or make a post and judge it and to mock something I didn't know anything about. So I think that is a beautiful moment. Now, that was probably not the majority of those people, but some of the bigger voices in the body positivity movement really were coming from an authentic, kind place of realizing they were too rash in a judgment of something they didn't understand.
And that ultimately we're all really trying to work towards the same thing: health on people's terms that can set them free and allow them to live their absolute best life. And if we can start lining up around the fact that we are all more alike than unalike, we'll get through this. I think many prominent figures don't take the time to respond, don't take the time to really engage. And you did, because you're high trust and because you really do care. And that's what spoke really to my heart here. What would you like people to know or learn from this conversation if they ever encounter any kind of challenge or shift like this, or the next time they hear their boss say, we need to talk? Because the reflex is the same.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, and that's the age that we're in. Everybody has, with the platforms that people have today on social media, everybody is an influencer to some level. Everybody is a micro influencer, even where the things that are put out there online can be misrepresented or misunderstood, or you're seeing things that are, and you're interacting with people that you maybe never would meet in person, or like you said, even in real life, even offline, these things happen. I would say it goes back to the stuff that we need to cultivate when things aren't crazy, when things are quiet. We need to be flexing our mindfulness muscle then, because it's like going to the gym, and the more you root yourself in your beingness, the more when things do get crazy and storms come, you will have built a resilience and a fortitude to be able to handle that storm with a little bit more grace and a little bit more lightness and a little bit more perspective. So that's what I would say. Don't wait till the craziness to like then try to like bring perspective, because it's going to be hard at that time. So I'm happy and thankful that I brought enough of the things that I talk about in the book of mindfulness practices in my life, where it really took a lot of the edge off of it. And I think if someone didn't have a center, I could see something like that being very, I mean, you hear about it, people in bed for weeks because of things online and things that are said about them. They can't get out of bed because they're so wrecked by other people's words about them. It wasn't that bad for me. It was really, the sharpness was definitely dulled because of my centeredness.
Because you've done so much of the work. It reminds me so much of in the beginning of A Call to Courage, which is Brené's Netflix special. She talks about how she read the comments to her first talk about vulnerability, and it made her so upset that she had to sit down in front of the sofa with a big jar of peanut butter and watching reruns of Downton Abbey to just calm down. You know, what I want people to take away from this is when you are hurling criticism online, it's not just a screen. There are humans on the other side. There are human beings on the other side. Don't dehumanize. Have a real conversation. Have a meaningful conversation as if you were actually in the room with someone. Pay them the respect of actually knowing their work before having any form of engagement. You know, I don't know if you know this about me, Will, but I've been a suicide counselor, a volunteer for many years. And one of the things that breaks my heart the most is little kids, like 13, 14-year-olds, who are bullied, and especially little girls online, and they have nowhere to run. And I think the reason that happens so easily is because we kind of tweet at people and thinking, who cares what this lands on? But when you're the recipient of any kind of comment like that, I've even actually had instances where somebody said, I hate your shoes. It's not very nice. I'm an actual human being. You're an actual human being. And our work really does speak for itself. If you have something to really talk about that is filled with a ploy for accountability, I think Will and I and Brené and others will be the first to really engage with you in a hefty conversation. But otherwise, just think about it before having this conversation. And maybe we can even change the tide of how social media is done. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a real honor to have this conversation. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this talk. I know everybody else has as well. If you've absolutely loved today's talk, all of Dr. Cole's actual information, his books, his podcast, and his Instagram will be linked in the show notes today. And if you'd like to learn more, hopefully you'll be able to contact him and follow his work and read all of this for yourself, because I think that's the best way to get in touch with a person's actual work. Again, if you've liked today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and subscribe. I want to thank you again so much, Dr. Will Cole, for being here today. And thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining Coach Karen. Would you like to have your questions answered on a future episode? Visit KarenEldad.com, KEREN Eldad.com, and tell us about your challenge or issue. Until next time, live with enthusiasm.